You know, it's like a lot of actors. There's an actor called John Cusack who I quite like, and he said in order to make a good film with integrity, I have to do like 3 Hollywood sort of fluff, and then I get the right to do this. And I wanted to email Russell Brand, and maybe I did, and I dreamt it because the result has come now. And I was going to say, look, mate, you know, I know you know about this, and I know you're trying to introduce it subtly in between all the kind of silly stuff you've got to do. Just keep introducing it a little bit more subtly every time, you know. Mm-hmm. And he kind of did that, and then a bit more, you know. He did this interview, and I haven't really followed the reaction to it. I can imagine it's very predictable, the reaction, and that he's... I mean, I saw Paxman did a little piece, and he said this thing which is just so simplistic, I wanted to like punch the wall. He said, Russell Brand's rich, so it's a bit rich that he's talking about the poor. Now, do you know what rich means in the other sense? If you say that's a bit rich, it means that's a bit hypocritical.
Oh, right.
Yeah, rich in English, another meaning. Oh, that's a bit rich, you know, meaning he's a hypocrite. And I mean, you know, this is just such a simplistic argument. I just, you know, I wanted to tear my hair out when I heard it, because it's just so simplistic, and it's just, you know, what I'm coming to realise is that, number one, what's considered controversial in the mainstream is just, as I said to you before, not controversial. You know, you just have to go right from the beginning, and you just have to take these baby steps, just gradually introducing tiny little things before you get to anything that's real.
Yeah, it's such a conservative environment.
It is.
And bent on, you know, in a way, self-perpetuation and preserving the status quo. That's, as you say, you know. Radical ideas don't find any space in there, and probably never will. But at least maybe some less radical statements, you know, and things that can spark a bit of, like, you know, critical thinking are always welcome.
God
forbid. The people who want to really understand what is going on wouldn't watch BBC, would they?
Yeah.
So, you know, at least he's planting some seeds, and well, then maybe they can go and peruse other information, and maybe, you know, start from there.
It's probably not going to do him any real harm, I don't think, either. You know, he'll get criticism, but I mean, you know, sure, he's got criticism. He went to work dressed as Osama bin Laden the day after 9/11. You know, he's a professed ex-heroin addict. I'm sure he's not worried about you know, little things like this. But yeah, there's this kind of I don't know if it's a false naivety. You know, you mention again some information that to anyone with critical thinking skills is so obvious, and you get this, oh really? You know, you get this funny kind of false naivety. But then I've been studying a bit more stuff about the mainstream media, and you're totally right. There's this conservatism, but then when you look at, someone did an analysis of sitcoms. And I don't know if you're familiar with Big Bang Theory or 2.5 Men. Probably not, no. Well, my nephews watch 2.5 Men, so I've seen a bit of that with Charlie Sheen. And I'm vaguely aware of the Big Bang Theory because I said with a teacher, when you teach teenagers, they mention these shows, and I always try and watch a little bit so I know what they're talking about. There's also this kind of liberal thing, like Charlie Sheen in this 2.5 Men is a guy who's, you know, has sex with lots of women, and he's kind of really loose, and he's got a brother who's the complete opposite, who's being screwed by his wife and for alimony payments and everything. And of course, in that sense, like, everybody goes with the liberal, you know, the kind of the easygoing guy. So, but that's not the reality when you get down to some hard issues. So it's, once again, it's just this conservative liberal game that's being played, you know, bit of left, bit of right, bit of liberal, bit of conservative.
Yes.
You know, and it's just...
Remember, the goal of the mainstream media is always to restrict the scope of the acceptable debate. You know, this is what Chomsky explained very well.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
You know, so that we keep you, you know, caged in a very small hole, and you don't, you know, you don't really say anything that is really, you know, in a way radical, and that doesn't mean, you know, untrue. There are a lot of radical statements that do reflect truth, but, you know, they are not acceptable in that kind of environment. And so, you know, you have this, like, Russell Brand, and he spent the 11 minutes, talking about important things, but these are merely symptoms of the problem. He hasn't touched not even remotely the exploration of the root causes of inequalities, or the fact that politicians actually they may be crooked, incompetent, but they're exactly serving the purpose they are there for, which is to slow down change, to serve their financial masters, so that kind of wide range analysis, big picture analysis is totally missing from the debate. But again, it's not probably in BBC that you will find it for the time being.
Yeah.
But we should probably take what was good of that, and and then maybe see how that will inspire other, how to say, prominent figures or celebrities, as they call them, maybe to speak out, to take the courage, to tackle these issues. And I think it hopefully can only get better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm struggling to think of anyone else who might do that, though. I mean, there seem to be a few guys in America. There's a few actors. I mean, John Cusack, I mentioned before. He's tweeted a few things.
Charlie Sheen is one of the guys.
But
who have been, very critical.
But he lives with hookers, and he's clearly a drug addict. So, and
they're all drug addicts. These people.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing that we need to talk about, because we both agreed when we were talking earlier that we don't have a problem. I was talking about David Shaler, who was the MI5 whistleblower, quite a fascinating guy. He has now said that he's thinks he's a messiah, and that he dresses up in women's clothing at the weekend. Now, he made two very good films, 9/11 and the British Broadcasting Conspiracy, and Mind the Gap, about 7/7. Now, for me, the fact that he cross-dresses doesn't change the fact that he made two good documentaries. The fact that David Icke talks about lizards, blah, 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 doesn't change the fact that he's very well versed on the banking system and alternate reality and that kind of thing, and has a very positive message in a lot of ways. But I think you've got to be quite savvy. It's a sort of irony that probably the people that do become drug users or drug addicts, drug users, they probably are the more expansive-minded people. And I'm not encouraging you or anything, but that just tends to happen. That just tends to happen. And the genius of the mainstream, the way to stop this critical thought, is that they marginalise people who are different. But it's the people that are different are probably more maverick and more likely to open their mind to other things.
Yes.
It's frustrating because that's the way it works.
That reminds me of the George Bernard Shaw sentence about the unreasonable man, when he says the reasonable man is the one who adjusts to society.
Yeah.
The unreasonable man is the one that wants to adjust society to himself.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, all the progress in society happens thanks to the unreasonable man. The questioning man.
Yeah.
And I think it's very true. It connects very well to what you just said.
And there's lots of wry quotes from people like Mark Twain, who's very good. Oscar Wilde, obviously, is very good with the wry kind of quotes. And there's quotes like something like unreasonable men commit the terrible crime of critical thinking, or they have this strange idea that they should think for themselves. Another good one is the thing about 2 + 2 = 4. From 1984.
1984, yes.
Yeah, they want you to believe that 2 + 2 = 5, and you have to actually believe it genuinely. You can't just say it. And that's where the brainwashing is total. Okay. The other things we covered last time, we covered the corporation personhood, and can't recommend enough the film The Corporation, which I've seen, and it was actually put together. It's about 2.5 hours, I think, and it was put together from about 25 hours of footage, which I'd quite like to see those. But they do a sneaky trick on these DVDs. They obviously, when you make a film, they obviously have quite a few hours of outtakes, and every time there's an anniversary, 25th anniversary edition, there'll be like a few more minutes of outtakes. Yeah, but the Corporation DVD has extra footage on it. Okay, we talked about the economic hitman and third world debts. So again, John Perkins' Confessions of an Economic Hitman is worth checking out. The banking system, and then 9/11 and its aftermath.